Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies Science Fiction Saturday. I've got a science fiction movie and a horror movie, but you know I vary things up on Science Fiction Saturday. Both of them are recent. One of them is from a long-standing franchise, and the other is a remake of a movie that was made over 100 years ago. So we'll get started with the long-standing franchise one, Alien Romulus. Now, I talked about Alien Romulus in a previous video, where I said I had heard that it was just a greatest hits version of the franchise. And somebody rightly pointed out to me in the comments, I hadn't seen it, so how could I criticize it? So I've seen it. And thank you for calling me on that. I appreciate it. It's an honest comment to make, and I corrected it. Alien Romulus is the 87th Alien movie, coming long after 1979's Alien, which I have said, and I stand by this, it's a haunted house movie set on an alien planet. This one, a bunch of young people who are living on a colony planet owned by Weyland-Yutani, the great big corporate bad guy of the Alien franchise. They work for the company, and basically they have work contracts, and they've got to pay out the contract of getting to the planet there. So they're basically wage slaves. A group of them who just happen to have a spaceship, but the spaceship doesn't have enough cryogas for them to all go into suspended animation so they can nick off from the shitty planet they're on, where people are getting all sorts of diseases and everything's going badly, and make it to a planet that's not owned by Weyland-Yutani. Fortunately, a derelict Weyland-Yutani spaceship is about to crash through the rings of the planet they're on, and they think there might be enough cryogenic stuff for them to fuel up their ship and take the years-long journey to this free planet they've got. Among these people are Kaylee Spaney as Rain, her kind of brother Andy, played by David Johnson, who's actually an android that's been reconditioned by her father to look after her when her father died. He got one of the many diseases the colony planet has. And one of the narrative lines in the movie is that Weyland-Yutani has found out that human beings aren't suited to live anywhere but Earth, and eventually there are going to be diseases and other conditions that kill them off. So colonizing other planets is a losing game long term for the human race. Interesting thread in the movie. Fully on with that. By the way, one of the other people on the ship, Kay, is played by Isabella Merced, who played Dora the Explorer in the Dora the Explorer movie, which is really good. I enjoyed that movie a lot. But in this movie, Dora is exploring a lot further away. So of course this derelict spaceship is derelict for the reason that they found the original alien that Sigourney Weaver chucked out of the airlock years ago, and for some reason it's fossilized in a chunk of rock. They extracted the DNA and made themselves a whole bunch of facehuggers, some of which got out, and everything did not turn out well for the Romulus-Remus space station spaceship, which is divided into two halves for no good reason, and it became derelict and just wandered into the planetary system of this planet, and is going to crash through the rings and incinerate doing that. So of course the crew, who are all young people, and while they're quite technically adept, they're not good at taking orders, they're not good at taking good advice, and one of the things they do when they get on the spaceship is they get Andy an upgrade, and that upgrade includes some instructions Andy didn't previously had. So Andy suddenly goes from being the slightly dim-witted android brother who tells dad jokes all the time while looking after Rain, to a highly intelligent and highly focused and highly analytical being who realizes what's going wrong and gives the group good advice they never take. Andy tells them, don't do that. They do it, and everything goes to shit. David Johnson, who plays Andy, is really good. He does the shift between Forrest Gump-like android brother to intelligent, analytical, and very, very focused android creature incredibly well. They find another busted up android on the spaceship called Rook, and here's the bit where I don't like it. And Rook looks exactly like Ash and talks exactly like Ash from the original Alien movie. They face map Ian Holmes' face onto a physical reconstruction of his face and basically a marionette puppet thing, and they got somebody else to do the voice. So it looks like Ian Holm as an android. They got the permission of the family to do that because they threw money at them, but zombie actors are not something I like in a movie, and you could have done it some other way. And that brings me to the problem with this movie. I'm going to talk about some other things that happen in the movie soon. But the problem I got with this movie is ultimately incredibly adept. The direction is good. Fede Alvarez, the director, is great. The acting, including Kaylee Spaney and the other actors, are on point. The production design's great. The special effects are good. The plot's not too bad, but ultimately it is a greatest hits version of everything that's happened in the franchise before that. So basically they threw everything at it except Michael Fassbender, and that's a problem. They even go to doing stupid things like having low-res CRT computer screens on the spaceships and on the colony planet as well, because in the original Alien movie, they had low-res CRT monitors for all the instrumentation on the Nostromo, because that's all they had in 1979. They didn't have OLEDs. They didn't have better screens. And so they decided in this movie, we're going to do low-res screens for this one. Even those people have got technology enough to have portable handheld X-ray machines, traveling interstellar distances, spaceships everywhere, humanoid androids, but they're going to have shitty CRT displays on all the computers because the 1979 movie had that. It looks wrong. It looks like pure fan service. Hey, look, that's just like in the old movie kind of stuff. So they get all the things you usually get. Somebody gets hugged by a face hugger. It implants something in them. The thing bursts out of them in a lot more gory way than it did in 1979. And it grows up. There's a whole bunch of other things that happen. There's some genetic engineering stuff that Weyland-Yutani are doing. But basically, it is greatest hits. All the little squee points for fans of the Alien franchise are there, including some high-tech weaponry and a whole bunch of other stuff. But there's also some weird things. There's a scene where an entire corridor, which has been taken over by facehuggers, the high-tech machine guns shoot the facehuggers, and their acid blood fills the corridor in big swirling arcs of acid blood. The thing they most resemble is, for those of you who have seen Behind the Green Door, there's a scene at the end of Behind the Green Door, the classic adult film starring Marilyn Chambers, where there is a solarized, multi-layered cum shot. And the arcing stuff from the facehuggers looks like the cum shot in Behind the Green Door. I'm sorry, but it does. It's weird. And liquids don't do that in zero-G. Liquids form globules in zero-G. You have a look at any of the science stuff that people on the ISS have done. Always globules. You don't get big jizz strings of liquids happening in zero-G. Look pretty, I suppose, when they did it in the computer, but it doesn't look realistic, and it just looks, could have done just as well with globules, but they didn't do it with globules. They decided to go fancy pants with that. And there is a big bad at the end of the movie, which is kind of something we haven't quite seen, though we've seen things not entirely dissimilar to it in the franchise. And that thing is played by a Romanian basketball player, but it doesn't look realistic at all. It doesn't move realistic. It looks more weird than scary and doesn't have the implacability of the original Xenomorph in any way. It just looks odd. Alien Romulus, I've seen it now, I've reviewed it now, and the TLDR of it is, yes, it is a greatest hits version, done with incredibly good technology. The computer technology is good. The practical special effects are fantastic. The acting's on point. The direction's good. There's some good suspense moments, but it's just tick boxes of all the stuff people expect in an Alien movie. And that in itself is disappointing. It doesn't move the franchise forward in any meaningful way, which means ultimately it's just fan service, and it's another way of cashing in on the franchise and cashing in on the intellectual property. Then I saw Nosferatu today. I hadn't seen a Robert Eggers movie. I haven't seen any of them yet, but I'm going to have to fill the back catalogue now. This movie's something special. I saw it down at the Village Cinemas here, about 1 kilometre away, because I didn't expect it to be showing at my local cinemas, because they don't tend to do art housey kind of movies there. But they did, so I went down there with my Australian Film Critics Association card. For the 18th time, I had to explain what an Australian Film Critics Association card is to the person at the cash register, because that's what happens with these kind of things when you're doing reviews of movies. People don't actually know what it works, but you're patient with them, you're polite, you smile, and eventually they give you a ticket. This time I was in Cinema 10, which is one of the ones that's been renovated, and I was surprised because they actually have reclining seats in that cinema. They don't have it in all of the seats. Their 4 rows towards the back aren't reclining seats, but the 6 or 7 rows before that have reclining seats. But my ticket was from 1 row back from the reclining seats. Now, I waited for a while. The cinema didn't fill up, so I moved my seat to one of the reclining seats and sat there instead. This movie is just so good. It's got a lot of the original Nosferatu in it, that German expressionism, that UFA 1920s silent era German expressionism is there in the movie. It's set in Wisborg in Germany in the 1830s. Nicholas Hoult plays a guy called Thomas Hutter, who is married to a woman called Ellen, played by Lily Rose Depp, and he wants to get a job with a real estate business because that's the way you make money if you're a poor educated lawyer in 1830s Germany. So he goes and gets a kind of job from the local real estate agent, a guy called Herr Nock, played by Simon McBurney, who goes through some interesting changes in this movie, because ultimately Herr Nock is the Renfield character, and he does some interesting things in the film and goes through some really creepy and icky changes. Now, Ellen, Thomas's wife, has a weird psychic thing. She had a breakdown when she was a teenage girl because she connected with some supernatural force and had a breakdown with it. She doesn't want Thomas to leave her. She loves him intensely. They love each other intensely, passionately, and sensually. And Thomas is going to be away for about 6 weeks, pissing off to Transylvania to go and get a deed of sale signed by Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård. And as Thomas leaves, she starts having a breakdown because she's getting like psychic communications from Count Orlok. She's staying with friends of Thomas's, a couple called Friedrich and Anna. Friedrich is a rich guy. He's an aristocrat who went to school with Thomas, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and his wife's played by Emma Corrin. They've got 2 kids, but they're privileged. They are very, very close to the other couple, but there's always that awareness of class between them. But Thomas goes off to Transylvania and has some weird experiences on the way, and when he gets there, we know what happens. I mean, we know the story. It's the same as Dracula, because Murnau, when he made Nosferatu, couldn't get the rights from Bram Stoker's widow to do Dracula, so he just went ahead and did it anyway. He just changed the license plates. This movie does recognize both Nosferatu, the original version, and Bram Stoker's Dracula as source material in the credits. So we all know what happens when Thomas comes back, and Count Orlok comes to Wisborg and brings with him a plague ship full of rats. There's a lot of rats in this movie. If you don't like rats, you're not going to like the movie. Dr. Siever's a doctor for the couple. He gets a friend of his, and he's one of his former teachers, Professor von Franz, played by Willem Dafoe, who's gone a bit alchemist and a bit occult after originally being a doctor. Gets his assistants to try to find out what's happening. Thomas has been debilitated by Count Orlok during his stay in Transylvania. He escapes, finds his way back to Wisborg just as the Count arrives. The acting in this is universally good. Simon McBurney as Nock is amazing. Nicholas Holt's great. Aaron Taylor Johnson's great in a secondary role. Didn't know Aaron Taylor Johnson was that short. Maybe a problem if he does turn out to be the next James Bond, but we'll see. Willem Dafoe is always great in everything I've ever seen him in. And Lily Rose Depp is fantastic playing Ellen. Now, we know Lily Rose Depp is a Nepo baby, or as they say, a legacy actor. I've got a lot in common with Lily Rose Depp, because both of our fathers were abusive, nasty, alcoholic assholes. So I've got a lot of sympathy for her and her circumstances. She is incredibly good. She goes a really long way. I don't want to say it's brave acting, because that's kind of patronizing and condescending, but it's bold, and it goes where the character needs to go. And the narrative shifts, because in the traditional versions of Dracula, which ultimately this is, the women are always seen as victims. But this movie shifts that narrative and makes Ellen much more on the front foot with things. And when she and Willem Dafoe's character liaise with each other and find out what needs to be done to defeat the Count and to save the city and save Thomas, it's her who has the power and the energy and the courage to do what needs to be done. And I like that. I think it's a really healthy shift from women as victim narratives in vampire movies to women as warriors. And she does what needs to be done to defeat the Count and defeat the evil that he represents, and to save Wisborg from the plague he has brought to the city. The direction is fantastic, and the cinematography by Robert Egger's usual cinematographer, a guy called Yaron Blashki, is amazing. The use of light and shadow, the use of desaturated color and having that real feel of an evil plagued 1830s German town in the middle of winter is amazing. The scenes in Count Orlok's castle are really well done, using shadow, which is the main power of the Count, to great effect. As Thomas enters the castle, he doesn't get to see the way it really looks until daylight. There are only little pools of light that he travels through to encounter the Count. And that's amazingly done too. Fantastic set design. It looks like the 1830s in Germany, as far as I can see from old drawings and things like that. And it doesn't just reference Nosferatu, the original Murnau version. There's a bit of Faust in there, Murnau's Faust, from the same period, where the shadow of the Count travels across the rooftops of the city. That's a direct visual reference to Faust, which I've got a copy of here, and it's an amazing, beautifully visual movie. Eggers borrows from German Expressionism extensively and in a way that is perfectly strategic to the story and to the visual storytelling of it. And the changes in the color saturation in the movie. There are scenes where there are not lifelike colors, but there are more saturated colors, and then less saturated colors, and then almost black and white. Is done incredibly well. It's fine-tuned to give us a visual reference. When the Count is affecting the environment, the colors just leach away like all life is being leached from the environment. And there's a thread through the movie as well about how in the 19th century women's medical conditions were treated. There are treatments like put a corset on her to make sure that her posture stays okay. And they use leeches because there's too much blood, because she has a copious menstrual flow. So obviously there's something wrong with her because she has too much blood in her body. And all sorts of things like that. The lack of knowledge about women's medical health that existed, and to a certain extent still exists today, is definitely in this movie. And I really appreciate that. But there's also a strong thread of acknowledgement of women's sexuality. And even though the society in which the movie's set, it suppresses that and doesn't admit it, or doesn't acknowledge it, and doesn't acknowledge the intelligence of women to a certain extent. There's a scene where Aaron Taylor Johnson's character confronts Ellen, and Ellen confronts him, where they don't come to any agreement at all. But she stands up for what she knows is right, despite the fact that Friedrich pulls out the privilege card and the wealth card to try to smack her down. She stands up for her own rights, and that works really well. It brings it not into the modern age, but it acknowledges that we're not living in the 1830s and we're not living in 1922 anymore. It modernizes the narrative without modernizing the setting or the characters at all. And I like that. I think it works, and I think it's an honest way to deal with this. And it's an honest way of giving us a more complex worldview within the narrative of a vampire movie than I think we've seen ever before. It's a great movie. I want to get it on 4K when it comes out. I think it's going to look smashingly good on 4K when it comes out. And it may be one of the great vampire movies of this century. Who knows? I haven't seen what the rest of the century's got yet. So that's what I've got for you this time around. Two movies, both sequels in a sense, and both remakes in a sense. One in a franchise which has been pounded to death almost, and another a remake of a well-regarded seminal horror movie from the 1920s, which is in the public domain now. There are enjoyable aspects to Alien Romulus, but it is the greatest hits version. And if you're into the franchise, you're going to enjoy it. If you have a more complex view about the franchise, you're going to be kind of pissed off with parts of it. But Nosferatu, you got to see it. You're going to like it if you do. By the way, there are a lot of things that turned up in the public domain this year as well. Beginning of January, lots of things became public domain in America, which means essentially de facto in the world. Things like Fritz Lang's Frau im Mond, Woman in the Moon, is now in the public domain. Metropolis has been in the public domain for a couple of years, but Frau im Mond is now in public domain. And a whole bunch of Cole Porter songs and a whole bunch of popular songs fell into public domain this year. I'm tempted to find a decent digital copy of Frau im Mond, and I might throw it onto the channel and just see what YouTube does with it. Don't know whether I will yet, but it's a possibility. It might be interesting to just experiment and see what's happening there. So that's what I got for you this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, give it a thumbs up. You can also donate to the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies, which is a good way for you to support the channel at the moment because the Australian dollar is not doing well and I get the Patreon money in American dollars. Next up, we've got the Monday video and I've got something interesting for that. I'm going to do a revisit on some older stuff. And until that happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some new films in 2025. There's some good stuff going to come out. And I'll catch you next time.